Have you ever grabbed an apple, and as you were about to take the first bite into it, stopped, looked at it, and asked it about the story of its life? I promise you I haven't lost my mind, but please bear with me. In fact, every day as we go through our supermarkets, filling our shopping carts with produce and with food products, how often do we usually reflect for a moment to think of all the natural systems, the resources, and the network of people that made this possible, made these food products available on our shelves? So what would that apple tell us, for example? It would tell us about the soil and its quality that it grew up in. It would tell us about the water it needed to grow, the source of that water, whether it was rain-fed, whether it came from groundwater, whether it came from surface water. It would tell us about the land it required, the fertilizers it needed. It would also tell us about the journey it took from farm to market and how much energy that took and how much emissions did that emit. It would also tell us about how much of that produced apples were wasted. So food is tightly interconnected with other systems, and we need to better understand these interconnections, better quantify these interconnections, and develop the necessary tools to develop evidence-based decision-making and evidence-based interventions across the food sector and all of the other sectors that are interconnected with it. And this also requires a high level of coordination between the different partners and actors across these interconnected sectors. And that's unfortunately not the case today. To give you an example of one of the projects that I've worked on for the past few years, which is an NSF-funded project in Texas, in San Antonio particularly, which is one of the most rapidly growing and urbanizing cities in Texas and in the US, which also has a lot of growth in terms of the agricultural sector surrounding the San Antonio region, as well as a lot of energy development with hydraulic fracturing, which is also very water intensive, which is also in that region. And all of these sectors are growing and are projected to grow into the future. And to give you a sense of that growth, so all of these dots you see on the map are water wells. The blue dots are water wells for municipal use for the city. The red dots are water wells for energy development, and the green dots are water wells for agricultural use. And we can clearly see with the growing sectors the potential competition that exists between these sectors over similar water, land, and financial resources in this area. So you would expect that these sectors are cooperating, coordinating at some level, planning together at some level. So we asked that particular question: how frequently are these actors across these interconnected sectors communicating? So we sent a survey to 157 water public officials in the San Antonio region, asking them about their frequency of communication with different water, energy, food, and planning stakeholders in the region. 90% of the responses we received from 101 water public officials showed us zero communication with any of the water, energy, food, and planning players. Out of the 10% that showed some level of communication in the past year, showed us that most of that communication is happening within the water sector itself, with little communication that's happening between water and energy or water and food and other planning stakeholders. So when we met with our stakeholders in the San Antonio region in a stakeholder engagement workshop and asked them, why do you think so? What are some of those barriers for communication? And they told us, we actually know about the challenges we're facing. We know that our challenges are interconnected, but there are certain barriers, mainly with the lack of coordination mechanisms between our different institutions. It's not of our mandate to do any of this coordination work. There are no financial resources allocated to do this kind of integrative planning. There are differences in planning horizons between the different sectors. The water sector is interested in a 5-year plan, where the energy sector is interested in more of a 2050 horizon, which also creates a challenge. The lack of collective outcomes and KPIs, common KPIs across the different sectors. So different sectors are measuring success in different ways, which also creates a challenge. And the lack of common goals. So as we think of how we want to transform our food system to a system that is more sustainable, resilient, equitable, we need to make sure that we are addressing these barriers for coordination and communication between these sectors. within the food system and other systems that are interconnected with it. And that coordination does not only need to happen at a regional scale or at a national scale. As a matter of fact, and as we've been seeing throughout the past couple of days, our food systems are global and our food supply chains are global. And that dialogue needs to happen at a global scale as well. And as a result of that global nature of our food system, a drought that's happening in Argentina or a conflict that's happening in Europe or the Middle East affects everyone, wherever we are in the world. And we're living through that today with the growing energy prices, reflecting on the growth in fertilizer prices, reflecting on the growth in food prices, making food unaffordable to those who can least afford it today in many regions of the world. And this is where the Sustainable Development Goals becomes a useful platform to really create coherent plans across different nations and to catalyze that collective action between different nations as we work towards zero hunger by 2030, while recognizing the tight interconnectedness between SDG 2 and all of the other SDGs that are interconnected with it. And this is where, here I'd like to emphasize that everyone has a role to play. You don't need to be an agricultural expert to play a role in transforming food systems. Everyone has a role to play, no matter the region you come from, the discipline you come from, the sector, your expertise, the age group you come from. Everyone has a role to play. We all can learn more about the source of our food and the resources it takes to produce those foods that we consume. We all could encourage local farmers, shopping at local farms. That doesn't only impact our local economies and improves the resilience of our food systems, but also ensures that we are consuming less resources, especially in terms of energy and carbon emissions associated with these food products. And third, reducing food waste. Around a third of our food, according to the United Nations, is wasted. And reducing that food waste ensures that we're reducing the resources and the pressures we're putting on the food system, and in turn, the pressure we're putting on other systems that are interconnected with it. The last point I'd like to end with here is the importance of including the different stakeholders across the different systems in the dialogue when we're talking about transforming into a food system that is more sustainable, resilient, and equitable. Sustainability, resilience, equity mean different things to different stakeholders across different sectors. And I think one of the main stakeholders that need to be in the room are farmers. And farmers have different technological capabilities, indigenous knowledge, as well as are facing different kinds of resource challenges in different places of the world. And we need to ensure that how we define sustainability and its metrics, and how do we define resilience of the food system and its metrics, incorporates how these farmers view sustainability and resilience and equity as we move forward. And here I'd like to call on all of us, whether we're talking about the next academic conference, talking about food system transformation, or the next policy dialogue. So we ask if there's a farmer in the room, and if there is not, make sure that we have an empty seat with us that represents the farmer's perspective on our panels and in our dialogue circles, to ensure that if we don't have a farmer in the room, that we are missing a perspective, and think, what would a farmer say as part of this dialogue? So the next time you're shopping for your next meal, or you're about to have a bite of your delicious apple, I'd like you to think of all of the resources, the network of actors, and all of the infrastructure that goes behind making this in our hand possible. And always thinking of the farmer that is at the forefront of facing a lot of the shocks and the challenges that we face us today. And think of the role that you would like to play in shaping a food system that is more sustainable, resilient, and equitable for all of us. Thank you.